This is Millard's Minis and Medicine, episode 2.
October 20th,
Oh, yeah.
2018.
Yes.
All right, so today we're going to talk about the Mcat, which I think is like the most dreaded 4-letter word in med school application. So I feel like going into the Mcat, or even like when we decided to make this transition to pursue medical school, the Mcat was always this kind of like looming horror that was about to approach. And I think some of that is overblown, honestly. It is a big test. It is a pretty big part of your application, but I personally don't ascribe to the school of thought that any one part of your application is going to make or break you. I had advisors and friends and other people going through the process that are like, your whole life, the rest of your future, your family's future, all depends on this Mcat, or it all depends on the personal statement, or it all depends on this class. And like, really, if you think about that, like, that's a contradiction in and of itself. Like, each of these individual components can't really make or break you. It's your entire application as a whole. It's things you've been doing for the last 20 years. It's your extracurriculars, it's your volunteering, it's your social skills, it's just your life experience and who you are as a person that all plays a role. Yes, the Mcat is a very large part of that, but it's not the end-all be-all. You can have an amazing Mcat not into medical school. You can have an okay Mcat or a less than average Mcat, and if you have a great application in other areas, you can still get into med school. So, all that being said, I think that was kind of like the guiding theme that kind of I tried to hold on to when studying for the Mcat. I think also like, so a couple things. Typically you should study for the Mcat. I think they'd recommend like 3 to 6 months. There was no way that was going to happen for me. I needed to take the Mcat in between my junior and senior year, which is very typical. But I was taking a pretty full course load, probably my heaviest course load in the spring semester, and was also working full time, had a family. So I really didn't have the time to devote 20 hours a week on top of all of those things during the spring semester to the Mcat. Again, my advisors were like, you've got to do this, like your family needs to suffer now to reap the rewards later. But I didn't really feel like that was an additional sacrifice that we could really handle. That didn't seem right to me.
So what was the time frame that you did have to study, and when did you take it?
Yeah, so classes got out like the first week in May, and I was scheduled to take the Mcat on June 30th. So that was about 6 weeks, I think, if you give or take. Like, I think I got sick right at the end of the semester, so I like took a few days off after that, which I think I needed anyway, just to kind of recoup before I dove into the Mcat. So I think initially I had about 5 to 6 weeks, including we also had vacation.
Planned a family vacation. Whoops, in the midst of that.
Which I was like, oh, I'm gonna work on the Mcat some there. No.
Yeah, and our brother-in-law was studying for his PT exam, so they both said they were going to study, and neither of them
I think we probably studied a combined 1 hour during the entire week. So that was what I had this 5-week block that I could study for the Mcat. I got a commercial course online, got the books, and it had a really cool feature for me was having like this like study planner. It was you put in the date you want to take it, how many hours you're going to devote, what your goal score is, and then it kind of like writes out a schedule for you, which was great, but at the same time it was like so easy to fall behind, and then it just starts compounding and you're like in the hole and there's no way you're getting out.
So a week into it, he was like, what am I gonna do? This is horrible. I'm so far behind this plan. I don't feel like anything's clicking because I'm so stressed that I'm like not following the plan. And so we kind of felt like, okay, well maybe we should see how to rearrange this to make it work for you.
Yeah, so there was that. Even though I feel like I didn't put a ton of pressure on the Mcat, it's still a big part of it's still important. So there's still some pressure. I don't think I had like anxiety attacks or like nervous breakdowns. No, but you
definitely had moments of like, what if I'm so far behind and then I can't retake it, and then I have to take a gap year, and then I don't even get in. Like, are you gonna hate me? What are we gonna do? Yeah, we did go through that a little bit.
So I think in general, like for my personality type, like working in emergency medicine for the last like 8 years, there's a certain component of like stress. I'm used to operating in stressful situations, and like the stress of an exam, the stress of the Mcat really kind of pales in comparison to the stress of like keeping someone alive from point A to point B when they're actively trying to die on you. So I think that's like one level for me, so I don't think I ever like totally freak out.
No.
But every semester, every big thing, I always have at least one or two like moments where Erica has to talk me off the ledge, and that was definitely one of them. Another thing was at one point I was like, let's push back the MCAT to like June, whatever, and then I actually like tried to schedule it and then put the wrong card in. Anyway,
Which
we ended up doing
it
that.
was really good that he didn't, because that was like would have been the end of July, and I was due August 14th with SE, but because of some concerns they had considered inducing me like the day after,
the day of
the MCAT, that if I would have pushed it back, and so that would have been super stressful.
Yeah.
So none of that happened, but we didn't know at the time that it wouldn't happen, and so it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So again, backing up, I had about 5 weeks to study for the MCAT, and had all these great plans of doing it. 5 weeks of no school, 5 weeks from the time I was going to start my program to the time I was going to actually sit for the exam. But that also includes, like work, family events, everything else. So realistically, I don't know how many days that actually is, but it wasn't a lot. And then also I needed to write my personal statement. I needed to fill out my AMCAS application. We'll talk about these two things in another podcast or
episode.
I listen to too many podcasts. So I think technically this is a vlog, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's a vlog. I don't even like that word. So 5 weeks, very loose estimate of time there. So so we get into the practice for the MCAT, start studying. I took a diagnostic, which I'd recommend anyone who's going down this path. Take a diagnostic. Take it as early as you can. I took it in between fall and spring semesters, so like winter break of my junior year. So this is like 6 months before I actually took the MCAT. And honestly, like I did really well on that. Like I was within striking range of my goal score from the moment I took the diagnostic, which is only a half-length exam, but still like that's fairly accurate for where your baseline is. So that again like brought me a lot of confidence in that I didn't have to traverse this in like 20, 30 points spread to get to what my goal score was. So I think that helped a little bit.
So part of me talking him off the cliff was, you already did, decently well on your diagnostic, so you only have to do a little bit better to meet your goal.
Yeah.
Like a little bit better. That's all you have to do. You don't have to be getting 100% on everything. Just a little better.
Yeah, and I think that was the case. Like I started doing the course, and I think the course was helpful, but I don't know. I feel like whether it's the MCAT, the SAT, any type of licensing exam on like the paramedic level, I have no idea about nursing or medical doctors, but a lot of it is honestly just test taking skills and common sense critical thinking. So I did some content review, nowhere near as much as I should have. Maybe like a couple chapters, did a couple lessons. And when there's like, 7, 8, 9 books, and I did like 2 chapters total, which I don't recommend. But I took like 4 full-length exams, and each of those, like I was scoring consistently in the same range of what I needed to be, or very close to what I needed to be, or what my goal was. So again, that kind of like alleviated some concern. Even when I took an exam, I took a full length, and I did it downstairs in our house here, and I hear Owen screaming or other stuff going on. I'm getting distracted, or I'm getting stressed out. Like, I still scored well. So, like, yeah, it was, like, super stressful in the moment, and, like, you get your 10-minute break, and you come out, and you, like, want to pull your hair out, and, like, oh, man, like, I'm going to push this exam back. Like, I'm just doing so bad. Oh, I'm so stressed. Like, I can't do this.
This one's not going to be good. I'm just going to bomb this one, and then he does fine.
And then I do fine. So, again, I attribute that to, like, critical thinking, and also, like, resetting. Like, at the end of every section, or honestly, even at the end of every question, it's like a whole new exam. So, like, you can't worry about if you had this super hard passage about whatever that you've never even heard of before, or you had a couple tricky cars questions, like you just move on. Each question is basically a blank slate, and you can do whatever from there.
Now, I will say, from my perspective, though, I've taken some professional exams and not done well, and I feel like I'm a decently smart person, and he just is a good test taker, so I don't know that he could have gotten away with the limited time that he studied if he wasn't just naturally a good critical thinker and test taker.
Yeah, I'm not laying out this as a recipe for success with the MCAT, because it ultimately came out to about 3 weeks of time, four full-length exams, and again, there was like a couple chapters, couple lessons, and I scored a really good score for better than my goal, actually, by 1 point. So we're not talking like I blew it out of the park, but I did well. And considering the time constraints, I think it was the right move to take the test on our initially scheduled date. Because I mean, I booked the MCAT. This is backing way up. Like, you book the MCAT, you should. And this may be like being a little bit aggressive, but like I booked it the day that the date's released and you were able to book it. So that was like back in October. And we really felt like June 30th was the right time, which was actually like the last date you could even take it in that like 6 months of dates that they lay out. So yeah, I think that was a good move to stay with that date that we planned on, that we kind of felt like this is the right date. Even though I did have some of that stress later on where I wanted to push it back a few weeks. I'm really glad we did. And like, I'm glad my application got verified and I got secondaries the time I did. Because I really don't think I would have bumped up my score. I mean, I don't know, 3 weeks, like that's doubling the amount of prep time I had. So who knows? But dragging that out and like some of the demands of my time, and yeah, the whole thing with the baby, that would have been a nightmare. So I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it was hard because he was finally out of school.
Yeah.
The first summer of our whole married life so far.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yes, we're finally going to get to do all these family things. And then we realized, oh, wait, studying for the MCAT is going to be just like he's in school. And so I had to adjust my expectations. And we had to really sit down and say, okay, like, what things do we really want to do? And then I think each week we talked like, okay, what days, like, are you going to be gone? Like, these hours, and like, I'm not going to bug you, and I'm going to try not to be like, you know, looking at the clock waiting for you, but to just like, so that he didn't feel stress knowing that, and like me hoping that he would be done sooner.
Because that would have just added more stress and sometimes honestly, one of those exams I took was like right before we were going to go on a date, which is again a really bad idea. I found for myself, like, I don't ever want to schedule anything, whether it's an interview or a test or anything, when I know I have plans afterwards. Like, for some reason I feel like I need to try to rush through it, and that just adds stress in the moment. And that was one of those days. So I think the way it ultimately looked like was I'd study probably about 6 hours a day, maybe.
And where did you study?
I studied in the bonus room most of the time. I did a couple exams here, and then after that nightmare exam where I thought I was gonna pull my hair out, where I had to like move 3 places like every break, then I started going to the library at school, and it was like a quieter area with a little bit of noise. It was like a little cubicle, so it was like pretty close to simulating test-like conditions, and I think that was a good move.
Yeah, if Owen knew he was in there, he would sometimes bang on the door, Daddy!
Daddy!
So that was a challenge.
Yep. So, so then I finally took the test. That went well. It was pretty uneventful there. You have a little like freak out moment, like when you're getting there in the first passage, some crazy chem phys passage that they intentionally kind of like make hard. From what I've heard, they put the harder section in the beginning, or the historically harder section. But again, like falling back on, okay, move through this passage. Once I'm through this, it's a new test. Okay, I don't know this question. Give it your best guess. I didn't ever like, if it was a calculation that I didn't know, or something I knew I just didn't know, I didn't wrestle with it. I just blew through. I did give my best guess. Sometimes I honestly just clicked C, and then I moved on. And I feel like that helped me, because then I was never time crunched on stuff that I could think about and could kind of reason my way through. So I feel like that was a good way to avoid those traps of being time crunched. And I ended up having like extra time at the end of every section, and yeah, it was I felt about the same as I did on my practice test, and I scored
that waiting period
a good bit
was
better.
really hard too.
That was a pain.
Trying to get waiting for your score, because every day we were like, okay, we're so close to knowing.
Yeah. So that was a long month, especially the last couple weeks before the score released. Then it got worse. The anticipation was worse.
We did it.
We did. Yep. So that was
that summarizes the MCAT.